Hello, we're rolling into another episode of the DRH show. As usual, in each episode, I'll be talking to interesting people within psychology, mental health, and well-being. My brilliant guest for today is a child development expert, Clare Stead. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Okay, Clare, just give us a trajectory of your life. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and how you ended up doing what you're doing.
Sure. So I'm a primary school teacher. I've taught the whole way through the primary curriculum. I'm also a mum of three. I then became an education researcher and worked with the top 5% of schools in England and Wales, looking at best practice and trying to roll that out across all the other schools and advising governments on what that looked like. And then I fell into making and developing e-learning content for governments and businesses around the world. And my previous role was I met a man on a plane, and long and short, he wanted to change the way education took place in Africa. And he told me what he was going to do. And clearly I should not play poker because I obviously showed that I should not, that I didn't like what he was necessarily suggesting. And he said, you have another way of doing it. So I told him what I was going to do. And he said, come and make it happen. So I then spent the next 15 years putting the whole of the primary education on a tablet for African kids to get international standard education in their own language. And so that was 12,000 lesson plans and 5,000 pieces of interactive learning content in 9 languages, voiced and translated. And one of those languages we had to write the dictionary for. But while I was working in all of those environments, there was one group of children that I kept seeing consistently, and that was a group of children who would arrive at school and not really thrive, and they couldn't really access the learning for whatever reason, and that worried me a lot. There was no real reason. They weren't special needs children per se. They were children who should have been able to be successful in their school career, but they weren't being. And then I saw a graph that came out of Harvard, the Center on the Developing Child, that showed the learning in the first 1,000 days of life. So that's from conception to 2. And it showed the amazing window of opportunity that it is, where you get this amazing curve of learning and this massive spike of opportunity of learning in this period of time. And I realized that what we needed to do was we needed to help parents find the learning for their child and help parents understand the importance of their role in the outcome of their child's life. And so I gave up working. I'd finished making the content for the primary product, and I wanted to really focus on how I could help impact the outcomes for children through helping parents to develop their skills and confidence and their ability to help their child through the play that they're doing anyway.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, I suppose you've already talked about this, but I'm just trying to get a deeper sense of why are you so fascinated about child development? I understand you're a mom of 3, but why you have such an ongoing passion and fascination with child development?
Because when I found out about this first 1,000 days, I couldn't believe the amount of impact that it could have on a child's whole life, but not just that one child, but also their children's children and the next generation beyond that. And so by helping our children to really see the amazing for helping our children to really have amazing experiences in those early days, we are going to change their life trajectory. And by the other thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be helping parents build a bond that is a really strong bond that really does last through those tricky teenage years and makes that time that can be often full of conflict and quite difficult actually quite easy and quite pleasant. And amazingly, it can all be done through play and through the experiences we give our children.
And actually what you're saying is actually supported by UNICEF. According to one of the articles that they publish online, the first 1,000 days of life is really crucial for, for health, for growth and neurodevelopment. So it's really fascinating how you really come up with this app, to encourage parents to create engaging activities for the children. Now talk us through your app, Oliiki.
Okay, so we have an app, and it has it's an activity to do every single day from the moment of conception, right the way through until the child is 2. And the idea is that those activities may well be activities that you're already doing, and that's kind of the point. And the activities are there to help. They're activities to do. Some of those activities are to stimulate conversation between you and your partner that you may not have anyway. Some of the activities that you're doing maybe activities that you're already doing with your baby. But then after the activity comes the reason why you are doing it and how that is going to help your baby in their life outcomes. And that's there to help build your confidence in their parenting capabilities and develop your child development knowledge. And then we tell you how to do it. And that's mainly don't drown your baby or leave them in water unattended, that sort of thing. Then what do you need? Well, most of the time, not a lot more than your baby and yourself, maybe a few things from around the home. And then there is the science behind it and what the scientists are saying about this activity and growth and development that you're giving your child by doing it. And then we have a final piece, which is all about the area of the brain that you've developed and the area of learning that you've developed by doing the activity. And the point is that by doing those activities, and by understanding the point of doing those activities, you bring out the learning through the play that you're doing, which helps the parents build their confidence in what they're doing. And the research in parents' confidence is just staggering, that the impact it has on later life outcomes for children. And so when we have high confidence in our capabilities and good understanding of what we're achieving and what we're doing, we actually enable our children to be brighter, more successful at school, have better learning outcomes. We respond in a more warm and appropriate way, even in tiredness and adversity. We set them up to avoid some of those life trickiness, but to navigate those tricky bits better, all from our confidence in ourself as a parent and the outcomes of the learning that we're doing with them. So it's really, really important that we enable parents to gain this confidence as early as possible in the child's life.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned earlier that you're a mom of 3. I'm just curious if your children actually did use Oliiki when they were growing up.
They didn't use Oliiki because it wasn't written, but they did use the mum who wrote the Oliiki app. Therefore, a lot of the activities in the app are things that I did with my children, or they also meet the need that I had as a mum when I was tired. And the dog tiredness of being a new parent is really unrelenting. And part of what happens when you're really tired is you lose creativity and the ability to think for yourself in that sort of come up with new and inspiring things to do. And if somebody had told me what to do with my child every day, I would have been utterly delighted, because I then would have had a little library of activities that I could have called upon on those really tired days. And I do remember one particular day coming home from work. I had 2 of the children by then. I think they were 1 and probably 2.5, and I'd been at work and I was so tired, and my childminder had fed them. I still had an hour to go before I could put them to bed. My husband wasn't home, and I remember lying under a tree with them and watching the leaves and watching the sun coming through. It was in the sort of early summer, watching the sun coming through the leaves and thinking, I'm so tired. I can't think of anything to do with these children. I'm such a bad mum. But actually, had I known that what I was doing for those children at that point was a significant brain development activity, which it was developing their eyes, it was developing their sensitivity. We were talking about what we were seeing. So we were talking language. We were looking at the way the leaves moved. We were trying to work out which way the wind went. actually we were doing science, we were doing language, we were doing vision, we were doing sensitivity, sensory development, I would have felt good about myself. But instead, I felt a failure. And that's the sort of thing that Oliiki is trying to do. It's trying to help parents see that those little things, those little moments are actually really significant and big moments for your child. And that actually you're doing a brilliant job. And then we feel more confident, we feel proud of ourselves, and that breeds more success. And that's what we want for parents.
Now, this is an interesting name. It's kind of cute, Oliiki. Does it really mean something, or is it just a made-up word?
Well, when I wanted to name the company, I knew I wanted to use the logo as the name as the logo, and I wanted something cute and round. So it needed to be an M or an O or an N or a U, that sort of thing. And then I went and I found interesting looking words, and I found a word which is like Oliiki but with only one eye, and that means olive in Estonian. But when you put two eyes, you get it to look cute, it means nothing, and you get the .com. So no, it means nothing. But it does mean great learning from the start. Great learning from the start. That's what it's going to mean.
Hopefully people would associate Oliiki with, you know, something baby, something for
after all, you and I are recording this over Skype, and Skype didn't actually mean anything when it started. But if I said to you now, I'm going to Skype you, it means something. So, yeah.
It becomes part of the lexicon.
Indeed.
Okay. Now, I just want to I understand more about the kind of work that you do. So, you mentioned earlier that you're a researcher. So who do you work with? Do you work with parents, or who else do you work with?
So the research that I'm doing now is into the impact of the app, and looking at how it impacts on that thing called parental self-efficacy over the summer. But I'm also working with a number of universities on that as well. Over the summer last year, I was at University College London doing something called their Educate program, which was helping companies be research ready, so that they could make sure that their company was always based in research, evidence-based research, because for me it's really fundamental that what we do really does make impact. And that's why every activity within Oliiki is also grounded in research. And the whole concept of Oliiki is based on the Harvard Center on Developing Child traumatic childhood research and their brain science. And obviously one of the other things I do as an Oliiki, I like our parents to really know what research is out there. So on my social media, I try and share all the fresh research that's coming out as much as possible from the play leaders and the thought leaders within these areas, because I think it's really important that we treat parents as grown-ups and we allow them to be really informed. And I want my product to be a leader and to be really trusted, because it is grounded in the latest research. So we are constantly reviewing and updating, because we want to make sure that what we're telling people is the latest research.
And when did you launch Oliiki?
Oliiki was launched in February 2019. So it's new. And I spent last year sort of playing around with what I was going to do and how I was going to get it out in the market, and starting to talk to health visitors and that sort of thing. And now I think the way that it's going to really take off is through working with people who already work with parents. So the hypnobirthers, the baby massage, baby yoga, the health visitors, they're all very interested. People who have IVF clinics, people who have nursery agencies, even down to people who have the 3D imaging scanning clinics, because how we work it is through an affiliate system. And because we haven't come into this to make money, we've come into it to make impact. And so the more people we can spread this out to, the better we can get that message out.
Now, tell me how how does actually the app work for, and what sort of activities can parents expect from this, and how long will the activities take?
The activities can take as long or short as your child chooses, and actually as long or short as you've got. So if you're trying to fit it into a day, it can be as short as sort of 5-10 minutes. Mm-hmm. The idea is that you build up a little library of those short activities that can be extended as long as the child is interested. So the activities might be as simple as singing Three Blind Mice. Mm. And when we look at singing Three Blind Mice, you say, well, I already do singing Three Blind Mice, but actually, do you sing Three Blind Mice in the knowledge of what it's doing for your child and the impact it's having and what it's actually teaching them? And when you do, suddenly you become so much more invested in it. So if we think about Three Blind Mice and we think about something called the threeness of three and conservation of number, what I'm talking about here is I'm talking about the threeness of three, so that I know, I'm just now rummaging on my desk for things that I've got here. I know that that is three things. Mm-hmm. And when I understand the threeness of three, I also know that that's three things, and that that's three things, and that is three things. Mm. And you know that three is a quantity, and it remains a quantity that is the same size regardless of whether it's an enormous big thing or a really small thing. Three is always that many. Mm. And that three starts with a number, and you count up to a last number, and that gives you the number that are in that group. That all has to be learnt. But then we have conservation of number, which means that when I really understand the threeness of three, I can understand that when I'm adding 3 to 2, I have a real solid understanding of how much this one is and how much this one is, and therefore I can understand more about how much they are combined together. And when I'm singing Three Blind Mice, I am, especially if I do it with the actions and I count the number of mice, I am beginning to develop that conservation of number. That doesn't mean that I am now going to do a big lesson with structured planning on how to sing Three Blind Mice. What it means is I'm choosing as a parent to sing Three Blind Mice in the knowledge that I'm teaching my child the threeness of three. So that then when I go to the supermarket that afternoon and I see 3 apples, I'm going to point out 3 apples to my children and help them count them in the same way. And then maybe I go to the pond and I see 3 ducks, and I again show them how to count those 3 ducks. We're doing that concretization of the threeness of three, that conservation of number, so that when they arrive at school, sometime down the line, like a really long time down the line, they've got a solid foundation of the understanding of that number. And that's sort of what we're doing in the activities. We're giving parents a very simple activity to do, but we're also showing them really what they're doing when they're doing that. And then they're much more engaged and much more focused on the outcome and the purpose of that activity. Another one might be going for a walk with a toddler and letting the toddler lead the pace of the walk, and letting them look and see all the things that they want to look and see as they go along. Very often we go at our pace, and we go because we're on a purpose to go somewhere. So we might be going to the park, or we might be going to the bus stop, or whatever it happens to be, but actually just going and allowing a toddler time to go and take their time and have the awe and wonder of what they find and see. And as a parent following the lead of the child, it's something we don't do often enough. And when we do that, what we find is that the child will be utterly fascinated in the little things. And if we then start looking really focused at the little things, say they pick up a red berry, for example, and we then both start looking at that red berry with great detail, and we start talking about what we're seeing, we ask questions, we investigate, we describe. What we're actually doing is naming nouns. So we're explaining the language, using language and an example. So we're placing language for our children. We're giving them labels for things. We're giving them the ability to look and focus and look carefully. And that actually, when you think about it, is the beginning of what we need for reading and writing.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be able to differentiate the difference between B and D, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And that we can only differentiate when we start looking closely at the detail and the structure of that language. So by taking that toddler on a walk and looking at a berry, you've actually started doing the beginning of reading and writing. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying we're reading and writing. What I'm saying is you are laying those foundations for later life learning. And suddenly that walk that seemed quite annoying, quite slow, quite dull, becomes absolutely fundamental to the development of your child, and really quite exciting because you're helping that grounding happen for your child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I've navigated your website and I've seen that you actually won a few awards, but for the benefit of those who's watching us, could you just, share to us your awards?
Thank you very much. Yes, I was very privileged last year to enter the first ever Lord Lieutenant of Hertfordshire's Enterprise Challenge. And we had to do a 3-day, we were at the county show for 3 days on a stand. And then we had to do a 3-minute pitch about our businesses. And there were 3 awards given out. First, second, and the People's Choice. I was very privileged to come second in the awards, and I also took home the People's Choice. So I was really privileged to take home 2 of the 3 awards.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay. I just want to delve more into another aspect of child development, because this is my chance, because I'm talking to a child development expert. Now, earlier you emphasized the importance of conservation of numbers. I also, based from what I've read, there's also an important aspect of reading. So based from your experience, could you just emphasize to us how important it is to introduce reading to babies?
Absolutely. When we start reading with our children from the earliest of days, we set a tone. Because when we read with our tiny babies, we have them on our knee. It's a cozy thing. We're sharing books. We're getting our children to look and really take detailed opportunity to take detailed analysis and study on pages. Because little people find information in books quite fascinating, but also you can both really focus in on stuff together. And it gives you an opportunity to teach a child how to use a book, which direction the book goes, which way the text goes. You can look at the pictures, you can talk about story, you're developing language, you're developing questioning, you're developing investigation, prediction, you are articulating different language that may be specific to the genre. So, for example, you might be reading a digger book, in which case you're going to have different diggers and different language with the diggers. Goodness me, I know a lot about tractors from my sons. But also it's comparative language. So maybe there's a big digger and a little digger, and there's also a visual going alongside that. So you get rich language, you get visuals to go with that language, which often is really helpful for a child, particularly with nouns, so that they're understanding that that noun is also going with that item, but also with your describing words, because then often what we do when we're reading a story is, oh, look at that little tiny weeny mouse. And we do it without realizing we're doing it. But what we're actually doing is giving the gift of language to our child. But we're also giving it to them in a cozy way, because they're all cuddled in with us as well. So what we're doing is we're saying, this is a secure and lovely thing to do. Let's do this together. Let's do it more often. Your heartbeat as you read and you sit with your child on your lap will drop. You'll be calmer. And that will also pass on to your child. You'll reduce all the stress levels. So actually, you're not just reading. You're doing so much more. But you're also setting your child up for a love of reading for life. And, you know, you shouldn't wait to do this. You don't wait until your child has language. This should happen. Well, on the Oliiki app, it happens as the second day's activity after birth. My children all had a story the first night they were born.
Okay, but can your baby actually even see the book?
So long as babies are born with vision that needs to be developed, but they are very clever things. So if you hold your baby at the height of you would for breastfeeding, then that's their best view. They can see most clearly at that height in the distance in the beginning, 20 to 35 centimeters away. So if you hold the book at that distance and you choose books that are either very bright coloured and bold, solid images, or black and white images, then you'll find that your baby is able to zoom in on them. And black and white images for babies are almost like a sort of mesmerizing drug. They're kind of completely captivated with them. And you don't need to buy these books. You can make them. You know, you can get a piece of A4 paper and make a book in one piece of A4 paper and just literally draw 4 very bold images in black felt tip on the page, maybe a swirl or a dandelion or a whatever, something very simple to fill the page. Just one, and they'll find it quite fascinating. And then the great thing is tomorrow you can have a different book. That's the great thing.
And how long should you read to your baby?
You'll be led by your child. So your child will be fascinated, but they will also find it quite tiring. So children show their tiredness, they immediately look away, or they start fussing, or they just seem disinterested in what you're doing. So be led by your child and make sure that it's a joyous time and that you get the joy out of it as well. Settle down, really enjoy being there. If they lose interest in that book, maybe they like another book, or maybe they just want to be cuddled, or maybe they want a song. And just use that time as a sort of calm time. And with reading, it's a really good idea to be able to say, right, well, 4 or 5 times a day, we're going to sit down and we're going to read a book. And I'm talking with the youngest baby, and even when you're still pregnant, because the baby can hear if you read aloud to your baby. And it doesn't really matter what you read. It might be Jane Austen or something highfalutin. It doesn't really matter. It might be a Beano comic. I don't really care what you read, but just read something to your baby. They're hearing your voice. They're feeling your relaxation, and it becomes the beginning of this cozy time of language development. And language development, sorry to keep going on, is so fundamental because in Britain, for example, 1 in 5 children are arriving at school not ready to learn, and it's our biggest special needs requirement is delayed language development. And around the world, 1/3 of our children won't reach their full potential, and a lot of that is about language development as well. So we do need to do a lot of helping our babies begin to love language.
And again, we have to emphasize that it's really crucial to introduce this on the first 1,000 days of their lives. Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, I just want to, because we pretty much covered about, you know, the research that you've encountered while developing the app and also while trying to, you know, get people to use the apps. Now, based from your experience, have you encountered about myths in child development? I suppose we need to talk about that for the benefit of for the benefit of those who are watching us. What are the myths about child development?
The myths about child development. I think some people think that you can wait, that you don't bother talking to your child until your child can talk to you. And actually that's so misguided. The more we talk to our children, the more we communicate, look at them, play with them, spend time with them, engage with them, the stronger the outcomes are. I mean, there's some research out about, it was specifically looking at men and how interactive the father's play was in the first 3 months of life. And then they looked at the cognitive development, in other words, the brain development, the capability of a child at 2. And they found that they were directly correlated. The greater the play, the more interaction the father had, the greater the cognitive capability of the child was at 2. So play is fundamental. Conversation is fundamental. And the more we chat and talk to our children, the more we're setting up that foundation for success. The more we use open questioning, the more that we allow the turn-taking conversations, even when your baby is brand new and can't talk. It's really, really important, because we are modeling how conversation takes place. We're looking at each other, you and I. But when we're talking to a baby, we want to be looking at the baby. We want to be using our facial expressions. For your baby, your face is effectively the television. That's the bit that they fascinating. So use it. Be really animated. Talk effectively with the child. Communicate with them, and then you'll find that what you're doing is laying strong foundations for later on. So that's one of the biggest myths. The other one I would say, and this is quite controversial, I would say take the dummy out. And the reason I would say take the dummy out during the day is that you stop language happening when the dummy is in the mouth. Now, that is quite a controversial statement. I'm putting myself out there, but I firmly believe it's a bit like one of mine used to wander around with a thumb in the mouth. And I'm afraid it was a case of, no, that's got to come out during the day. You can have it to go to sleep if you want to, as a self-comforter and a self-soothing, or if you're upset. But during the day, it needs to be that you can communicate. And if you've got something physical in the way, then you stop communication happening.
I think it's also about, imposing control to the baby at a young age, that, you can't just do everything you want just because you find it pleasurable. But thanks for, casting some lights on those myths about child development. Now, what I want to talk about now is that, you earlier you underscored the importance of research and empirical evidence when it comes to child development. Would you know of any reliable sources for those who want to explore more about child development? Do you have a blog where you continuously write about child development?
Yes. So on the Oliiki website, www.oliiki.com, I'm on there regularly blogging about ways that you as a parent are able to impact on your child's development. I also would really recommend that parents who are wanting to get into this in quite a deep way look at the Centre on Developing Child and Harvard, or even the Peddle Institute in Cambridge, or the Lego Foundation. They are all, Lego and Peddle are researching into the importance of play, which is not something originally I had thought would be a research area, but it's so fundamentally important to our life outcomes that they are now have whole institutes specialized in this. And so these are areas that I would recommend people have a good look at. Yeah.
So there are actually universities and educational institutions who specialize in these areas. Now, for those who are considering to pursue a career in early education, what tips would you give to them?
Do it. It's I would definitely get some experience. I would definitely work with children, maybe see if you can get some work as a nanny, or work in a early childhood setting, because you learn so much from the children themselves, but you also learn a lot from watching other practitioners, good ones and bad ones. I had one placement when I was training where I took nothing away from it other than what I didn't ever want to be. It was a brilliant learning experience, and it was also amazing when I think I had a month where I was doing my practice in that classroom, and I had a month shadowing before that, and it was fascinating spending that first month thinking, this is so wrong, and then the second month being able to put in place what I thought was going to work, and watching these children thrive and blossom, and bringing proper play into classrooms, and getting rid. It was a nursery, and getting rid of structured reading and writing and sessions that were happening as almost like a year one classroom, which is so grieving, and just watching the children thrive in that environment. And the great thing about getting out and experiencing and watching other people's is you get to try, and you see what works and what doesn't work, and there's no shortcut to this. I was in a nursery every single week, sort of 3 times a week, from the age of 16 right the way through to the end of my training. training, and I took well, in the end, I did a 5-year training at university. So I did a lot of experience and watching lots of different other classrooms and different learning environments. And then I nannied all the way through my holidays as well. And it was through being in those different environments that I got a lot of my experience. And I saw a lot of really good parenting, really poor parenting, but also, you know, just seeing how people interact with children and what works.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, Claire, finally, could you just tell us what's in the pipeline for Oliiki? Do you have any future talks or future events?
Yes, I'm doing quite a lot of work with health visitors at the moment, and also with the schools of the trainers of like doulas and hypnobirthers and that sort of thing. I also am an expert on the parent platform, which is a Facebook page for parents where they can come. It's a really cool idea. It's they come on and they can ask the expert. The expert comes on once a month to do a live, and they can ask the expert directly, so they don't have to spend money on finding an expert. They can ask direct questions, and so that's quite a cool place. And yeah, so there's quite a lot in the pipeline actually, but those are the ones I can sort of talk about.
Now, Claire, could you just tell us how we can have Oliiki? Is it available on iPhone and Android, and is it a free app?
So yes, it's a free app to download off the app stores. You get, depending on when in the week you download it, you get 7 or 14 days of activities to do, and yeah, it's in the app stores under Oliiki, which is a strange name, but I know you'll put the links in below. And then of course we're on social platforms as well. We're on Facebook, Instagram, a little bit on Twitter, and obviously we've got our website, oliiki.com.
Okay, thank you for sharing to us your app and your expertise about child development. It's really been a fascinating conversation, Claire, but let's leave it there, and I'm looking forward to hear more about your work.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.